Upon beating Sonic Superstars, you probably had a multitude of questions such as, what the hell was that final boss, man? Why is Sonic doing that? What's going on? And 3, what is with this music? Why is it a Sonic 4 version of the T. Lopez tracks in the game? What's going on? Well, what if I was to tell you that this music is actually a sign of a very troubled development for Sonic Superstars? And I know what you're thinking. A Sonic game with a troubled development? What are you talking about? Especially Sonic Superstars. It's a very, very polished game with absolutely nothing wrong. Okay, ignore that. That was my fault, actually. My bad, guys. My bad, because look at this clip right here. I mean, perfectly polished game, right? It's real. My bad. You know, it's not the game's fault. It's clearly my fault, right? Sonic Superstars is a very polished game. Okay, who the hell said this game was polished? Who said that? Why is the music playing at 2 times speed? And why is the music just gone all of a sudden? So yes, the development of Sonic Superstars clearly wasn't all that smooth with glitches like these. Now, using a bunch of different sources of information, I have actually come up with a timeline of events that kind of paint a picture as how Sonic Superstars was developed. Now, we'll never know if this timeline is actually going to be correct or not, because obviously Sega are never going to admit to something like this, because that's not a thing that companies are supposed to be doing. They want their customers to have faith in their product, so by admitting to something like this, yeah, that would be doing quite the opposite. But regardless of whether this timeline is accurate or not, it's still something very interesting to think about, in my opinion, because it's just interesting to think about where things could have gone wrong and how they could have been solved. So with all that being said, let's delve into this possible timeline of development for Sonic Superstars. Actually, hang on, just before we carry on with the video, something tells me that you're not subscribed. How do I know that, you ask? Well, look at this. Are you seeing that right now? Most of the people watching this video right now aren't subscribed. What's going on with that then, eh? Press that subscribe button right the hell now, because, you know, just saying, Sega was telling me that if you don't subscribe right now, they ain't releasing that Unleashed port. Okay, they didn't actually say that, but come on man, you should still subscribe right now. You won't regret it. Trust me. Anyways, I'll stop bothering you now, so on with the video. Our timeline begins all the way back in early 2021 with none other than the man himself, Zippo. So on February 5th, 2021, Zippo posted a blog post titled Sonic's 30th Anniversary and What to Expect. Now, of course, some of the things mentioned in this blog post didn't actually come true, sadly. But back in 2021, one of these things actually caught a lot of people's eye, including myself. And it was this paragraph right here, a new 2D Sonic. This is the one I've heard the least about. Iizuka alluded to this one last year, but I would bet money that this is coming rather soon as well. It's a game with the modern cast, so I think a return to Sonic Advance / Rush formula is what we're getting here. Summer to fall is pretty much certain. Who's developing it? I'm not sure, to be perfectly honest. But I have a hunch that Dimps is developing this title, as their schedule is strangely empty at the moment. I know they're a controversial developer among many Sonic fans, but I would blame their weaker titles on Sega's lack of oversight rather than Dimps themselves. They're an extremely talented and diverse developer in the variety of games they make, so I'm confident in that they can make a great Sonic game again, if it is them developing. Edit. I don't know why this is being so misconstrued, but I'll do a rundown just to make it more clear. What I know, it's a 2D game featuring the modern cast, likened to Sonic Advance / Rush. From what I understand, it's not internally Sega developed. It's not Nintendo / console exclusive. People want that for some reason. I don't know how many there are exactly, but there are apparently multiple playable characters. It's nearing the end of development. Seems to be a summer release, which should give enough space between that and the 3D game. Edit 2. Again, just to make it clear, since this has confused people, I do not know which developer is developing this title yet. Now obviously we know that not a lot of this actually came true, unfortunately. A 2D Sonic game did happen, but it was not modern, and it was actually Sonic Superstars, a classic Sonic game. But there are some things here that are quite accurate. Most importantly, the part where it says it's not internally developed at Sega. Now then, fast forward an entire year later to Soa City with this article on March 16th, 2022. Rumor. Unannounced 2D modern Sonic title has been cancelled. According to one of our sources, a new unannounced 2D modern Sonic title is rumored to have been in development. We were sent these details in May 2021, and we have now received permission to share them. the source behind these details leaked an early version of the Sonic Forces script a while ago, and shared details regarding remakes of Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2. The source is also connected to the Sonic Colors Ultimate leak, with details on the movie Sonic in-game skin ahead of the official announcement. While the source behind this leak has been credible, this should be regarded as nothing more than a rumor. We were shared the following details. These details are dated back to May 2021, based on the modern cast. Made it quite far in development, cancelled as of May 2021 for unknown reasons. Unfortunately, this is all we know at the moment. While these details on a potentially cancelled 2D title are interesting, there's been no official announcement regarding a new 2D Modern Sonic title. This article should be regarded as nothing more than a rumour. Now I know what you're thinking right now. Unleash, why you mentioning this random 2D Modern Sonic game that got cancelled? Cool, but how does that relate to Sonic Superstars? Hang on a minute, we're gonna get that soon, don't worry. This is part of the entire timeline here, so let me cook right now. Right then, fast forward a couple months in the same year to May 8th, 2022 from Zippo once again. Scoop! The new 2D Sonic game is alive and well. Hey everyone, last scoop from me for a while. Remember in my very first article how I talked about a new 2D Sonic game was in development and then things went completely silent on my end? Well, I started to hear things about it again recently, and you'll be happy to know that the project is alive and well. Here's a few more details about it. Believe it or not, it's actually being developed by Sonic Team, with little to no outside involvement. This is the first time they'll be developing a 2D Sonic game in nearly 30 years. It's being billed as a follow-up to the Sonic Advance and Rush series, in the same way Mania was a follow-up to the classic series. Sonic, Tails and Knuckles are playable. This is the first time Tails and Knuckles will be fully playable in a modern focused 2D game since 2004's Sonic Advance 3. It's been a very long time, folks. I'm unsure of the release timing at this moment, but given that Sega has recently doubled down on Sonic Frontiers releasing this holiday, it's safe to assume that this will be a 2023 game. So again, not everything here is accurate to the way Sonic Superstars actually turned out. But up until this point, we know that a 2D Modern Sonic game was in development at one point, got cancelled, then restarted development at some point. Now just bear this point in mind right now because it's going to come up again later. So jump forward 1 year later again to June 2023 at Summer Game Fest when the game Sonic Superstars is finally announced. A new 2.5D classic Sonic game that's completely original and developed by Arzest and from help with Sonic Team. And at this point in time, the hopes of a new 2D Modern Sonic game are officially dead. It is no more. The game was a classic Sonic game all along. Now when the website for Sonic Superstars first released, there was this image on it right here where the game was titled Sonic Orion, which we assumed was a code name for the game, obviously like Sonic Rangers and obviously Sonic Wars for Sonic Forces. Now we can't find a source for where I heard this from, but apparently the word Orion relates to the number 5, and obviously in Sonic Superstars there are 5 playable characters once you add Trip onto the mix, so that would make sense why it was called Sonic Orion, then changed later on to Sonic Superstars. Now the name Orion doesn't really have any significance here, but again, it's still part of the timeline of the development I suppose, so it's just worth mentioning. Now then, a couple of weeks down the line, we got this interview from Brian Shayer on Game Informer titled, "Why didn't Sonic Mania 2 happen?" In 2021, reports from a gaming insider named Zippo surfaced that internal plans to create a true successor to Sonic Mania had been scrapped due to differences between Sonic Mania's external developers and Sega. While not directly confirming or commenting on that particular report, Iizuka confirms that he had talks with Whitehead following the release of Mania. There was a period after the development of Sonic Mania where we worked with them to consider concepts for the next generation of classic Sonic, Iizuka says. "It's too bad that it didn't become a finished game. Still, I'm pleased that the next generation of classic Sonic that we talk about with them has been achieved with Superstars." Whitehead backs up this story with his own recounting of the events. When we started Evening Star, it was always our goal to move beyond 2D pixel art into 3D games and develop an all-new original IP, he says. Evening Star did work with Sega to explore possible directions classic Sonic could go after the success of Sonic Mania. Sonic Mania 2 was never in development though, because we actually agreed early on that we should try to make something fresh, like hand-drawn 2D or 2.5D. At the same time, Evening Star was developing our new Star engine, so we also ended up making a cool Sonic prototype that played with depth in 2.5D and some other gameplay ideas. Following those initial planning sessions and a mutual decision to not proceed with development, Evening Star began work on Penny's Big Breakaway. As Iizuka-san said though, Evening Star did not continue to full production on the game, at which point Arzest took the helm and made Superstars alongside Sonic Team, Whitehead says. "We moved forward with our plans to develop an original 3D title, which is of course Penny's Big Breakaway. Superstars looks awesome and our team is really excited to play it when it comes out." So now we have two directions of where Sonic Superstars was supposed to go. 1, a possible modern Sonic 2D title, and 2, Sonic Mania 2. Now the reason that Sonic Mania 2 was scrapped entirely was because of the fact that they didn't want to stay with 2D pixel art but instead going to 2.5D, so Mania 2 is out of the window, leaving again just a modern Sonic 2D game. And judging by the fact that Modern Sonic is always in 3D, going from Sonic Mania 2 and taking that into 2.5D is probably where Modern Sonic fell into the mix of things. But why was Sonic Superstars still a classic Sonic game if Modern Sonic was still in the mix at some point? Well, I think we have the answer to that now with this next interview that we're going to read, which actually ties a lot of these plot holes that we had from before all together now. Interview: How Sonic Superstars was born from a Zoom drinking party. Sonic creative officer Takashi Iizuka explains why the next side-scrolling game needed to leave Retro behind. Who's working on the game? Sonic Team appears to be partnering with Arzest, but are you collaborating with Headcanon or Chris in Whitehead/Retro Engine at all? When we were making Sonic Mania and the game was finished and Chris was done, we had a conversation with Chris and the team about what the next 2D game we make should be. We had some concepts and ideas laid out between the teams, but we couldn't kick off the project, and so it disappeared for a while with Chris and the team. I'm friends with a lot of my old co-workers, and I was having a conversation with Oshima-san about how we should make a Sonic game together, and if he'd be interested. He's the original creator of Sonic the Hedgehog, and so we had a conversation about whether his company Arzest would be interested in working on a Sonic game. So there were ideas with Chris and the team that fell through. Sonic Superstars is really all developed by Arzest, but Sonic Team in Japan is working with them on design and some other elements. Arzest and Oshima-san are 100% developers of the game. Naoto Oshima is back for what appears to be his first Sonic game since Sonic Adventure over 20 years ago. What did he bring to the project? During the coronavirus lockdown, Oshima-san reached out and we set up a Zoom drinking party connecting America and Japan. We decided to get together and just have some fun. During this conversation, I mentioned that I wanted to make a new 2D Sonic game, and Oshima-san replied, "You know what? Me too. That sounds like a really great idea." So what started out as a really casual conversation ended up being executed on. And that right there ends the timeline. So to talk about this last part right here, this kind of ties everything together in my opinion. So going back to the point of the Modern Sonic 2D game being cancelled in May 2021 apparently, here's where I start theorizing a bit. So we know this Modern Sonic 2D game was probably in development during 2020 and before that. We don't really know when it actually started development, but I'm guessing around 2019 at some point, because obviously with Mania 1 coming out in 2017, then Mania 2 being conceptualized but never coming to fruition, that must mean development started in around 2019 or afterwards. Now when all this lockdown stuff broke out with COVID-19 or whatever, this all started in around 2020. Now bearing in mind that this 2D Modern Sonic game was cancelled in May 2021, or at least that's when information about it being cancelled was shared, what if part of the reason that it was cancelled was because of Takashi Iizuka talking with Naoto Oshima again, as then all that somehow led to this Modern Sonic 2D game being repurposed into a classic Sonic game? Why do I think that because of Naoto Oshima, this cancelled Modern Sonic 2D game was changed into a classic Sonic game? Well, for starters, Naoto Oshima is more famous for his classic Sonic designs of the original Sonic the Hedgehog, and he's also done classic Sonic level design for Sonic 1 and Sonic CD2. And then also, think of the context of when Sonic Superstars was in development as well as this Modern Sonic 2D game. This was back in 2020 and 2021, a time where we just came off of Sonic Forces and also Sonic Mania, Sonic Mania being the most successful of the two games. Also at this point, we had the game Sonic Frontiers in development, and by 2021, things weren't really looking all that great for Sonic Frontiers to be honest, because at that point, Iizuka was begging Sega to give them another year development to actually get the game finished, and Sega were very reluctant actually giving them that year to develop the game. So here's what I think. From the eyes of Sega, Sonic Forces was the last Modern Sonic game and was met with some mixed reception. Sonic Mania, on the other hand, was actually met with great reception and everybody loved it pretty much. Now with Iizuka asking for another year on Sonic Frontiers, Sega probably didn't have much faith in the game. And we know from an interview recently that because of the Sonic movies, Sega actually realized that people care about Sonic and they should put more effort into actually making the games good and more frequent again. But back in 2021, Sega didn't know that Sonic Frontiers was going to be a massive hit. Back then, they thought that Classic Sonic was their moneymaker and not Modern Sonic anymore, because of Mania and Forces. So I reckon this is probably a repeat of 2017 again, where instead of having two Modern Sonic games, Sega went instead to get Sonic Team to repurpose Sonic Superstars into a Classic Sonic game rather than a Modern Sonic game. That way, if Sonic Frontiers was a total flop, they'd at least have a Classic Sonic game to fall back onto and have that be a success. And in my eyes, that makes too much sense. Like, that just makes too much sense for it to not be true, especially with the way Sega reacted to the way Sonic Frontiers actually did pretty well. But now then, let's talk about the music of Sonic Superstars, because there's actually once again an interesting story behind it. So So we all know that Jun Tsunomi worked on the Sonic Superstars soundtrack, and yeah, it clearly shows in stuff like Golden Capital, Press Factory, and etc. But weirdly, with the Sonic Force sounding music, we also had bangers like Sonic Sanctuary and Lagoon City made by people who weren't Jun Tsunomi, like T. Lopez, Rintaro Soma, and some other people. Now remember the Sonic 40 sounding versions of the T. Lopez songs from the credits earlier? Well, there's actually a big plot twist there, because instead of it being a Sonic 40 sounding T. Lopez song, it's actually a T. Lopez-y sounding Sonic 4 song. Because in the files of Sonic Superstars, there lies many early versions of a lot of songs in the game, some of which weren't Sonic 4 sounding in the final game. So obviously we first have Bridge Island Zone Act 1. Now interestingly enough, there's no early version for Bridge Island Zone Act 2. Now whether that's because there isn't actually an early version of that song anyways, or it just isn't in the game's files, we don't know. Jun Tsunomi is actually credited for composing Act 1, but if you go to Act 2, both T. Lopez and Jun Tsunomi are credited for Act 2. Which leads me into my next theory here. Now if we go back to the days of Sonic Superstars pre-release, remember that piece of gameplay of Speed Jungle where instead of having the actual music from that stage, we instead had Sonic 4 White Parker Zone Act 2? Now, hear me out here. What if the reason that the Sonic 4 music was there in the first place is because by the time that gameplay was recorded, the actual music hadn't even been made yet. The first time we ever heard Speed Jungle Zone Act 1 was in the Nintendo Direct trailer for Sonic Superstars. So here I come with another theory about the music this time. What if originally Jun Tsunomi was just supposed to be the only composer for the game, but then Sega heard some of his music and they were like, whew! Oh Jun, oh, is this what you've been doing? Oh, you know, I think we're gonna have to get T. Lopes on this one. You know what, get T. Somebody get T, please. Hurry. We gotta fix this mess. Jun, what the hell have you been doing, man? Oh my god. Get T immediately, bro. Get him down to the studio now. Now, I assume that T was brought in quite late into development because of, you know, let's just go back to the files for Sonic Superstars right now. Right, we have another early version of the song for this Fang boss fight, so let's play it right now. Now then, does that music sound familiar to anybody here? And if it does, it should, because that ain't no Sonic Superstars early version music. That is straight up Sonic 4 music. And it is currently in the files. Like, this was in the files. This is a placeholder for the Fang boss fight. But the Sonic 4 placeholder music didn't even stop there, because right here too again, we have Death Egg Mark II Act 1's music from Sonic 4 Episode 2 used as a placeholder for one act in Frozen Base which we don't know. Now this is kinda weird because for Frozen Base and the Fang Hunter boss fight, T. Lopez didn't have any part in those songs, so it's weird how they had placeholder versions for those. So that means as well as T being brought on late in development for the music, that means they had their own problems with the music in the first place. Maybe Jun was struggling to come up with music for the game too, which is why we got so many different composers working on the game just for this small soundtrack. Because every composer on the soundtrack did one small part of the game. Jun composed a lot of the songs in the soundtrack, but obviously a lot of them ended up getting arranged by other composers on the soundtrack to make it sound like not Sonic 4. Now, going back to some early versions of the songs in Sonic Superstars' files, there are actually a lot of early versions of June's Sonic 4 sounding songs in the game too. But also, the ones that don't sound like Sonic 4 songs in the final game originally sounded pretty Sonic 4-y. But the worst one here was Cyber Station Zone. Just listen. Oh my god. Cyber Station dodged one hell of a bullet, man. Can you imagine if that was the actual music in the game for Cyber Station? My god, it would not be the same. My god. But this does bring up another thought. What if all these other composers came to rectify what Jun Tsunori had done by changing all of his Sonic 4 sounding songs into ones that don't sound like Sonic 4 and sound, you know, actually good? But then that begs the question, why doesn't the entire soundtrack sound like not Sonic 4? Well, maybe it's because they just simply ran out of time. they just want to get around to fixing all of June's messed up songs. And it seems that most of the Sonic Force Landing songs in the game don't actually have early versions, it's just the ones that have actual instruments in the actual game. So unfortunately it looks like that stages like Golden Capital and Frozen Base didn't get the treatment that other stages like Bridge Island got, which is why they still sound like Sonic 4 songs in the game. And if that is the case and that they just couldn't get around to doing it in time, that really is a shame, honestly. That really is a shame. Sonic Superstars has one of the most controversial Sonic soundtracks of all time, and if more time for the developers just meant that the game's soundtrack could have been fully good, that really is a shame. Wow, a big shame. But yeah, I think that is pretty much everything on the development of Sonic Superstars, so yeah. What have we learned today? What have we learned today? So, 1. Sega, you still haven't learned much, have you? Maybe you have in terms of the main Sonic series of Sonic games, but with the ones that aren't like the main 3D games, yeah, you still got a lot of work to do, mate. A lot of work. 2. Maybe with the reception of Sonic Superstars and Sonic Frontiers, maybe the next 2D game could be a Modern Sonic one now. Because Sega probably no longer see Classic Sonic as their moneymaker, because Modern Sonic is out on top. Frontiers sold brilliantly, so it might be time for a new Modern Sonic 2D game, people. It might be time. The development of Sonic Superstars was indeed very troubled from this timeline that I've created in today's video. Now, again, there's no telling if this timeline is actually correct or not, but again, Sega are not going to admit to it even if it is right or not, so I guess we'll never know unless somebody comes out with it who's actually a developer from Sega. We'll just have to see. But, what do you guys think of this timeline? Do you think this is accurate, and if you think it is, what are your thoughts on it? Are you disappointed, or do you expect this coming? Let me know down below. I'd love to see what you guys have to say. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, especially that last one. Don't forget to become unleashed. Pushing that join button down below. Remember, it's not necessary. And I will see you all next time. Peace.